This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, thanks for joining us. It's the SpaceCom Entrepreneur Summit workshop. It's the fourth day, and just wanted to thank our sponsors and partners, the Italian Space Agency, Amazon Web Services, AFWorks, GenSpace, the ISS National Lab, Twilio, Lockheed Martin, Long Capture, HubSpot, and the Brazilian Space Agency. We'll be starting our meeting today in 3 minutes. And a special thanks to today's workshop sponsor, Long Capture. Well, welcome everyone. It's workshop day 4. It's kind of sad. It's the last day of the workshop, meaning we're all together for the last time, at least in this instance of SES, on a webinar that we can all participate in. The rest of the series of meetings that we're going to have for the summit are going to be Mentor Week next week, where we're going to break out into individual groups, and then the finals. So again, I strongly urge everyone to attend the finals. The webinar for the finals will be a broadcast kind of a mode where we won't be able to see everyone except for the speakers. My name is Stefan Recke. I'm the Executive Director of GenSpace and have the pleasure of now doing my 4th workshop for SpaceCom during the Entrepreneur Summit. Today we're going to be talking about the perfect fundraising pitch workshop. Well, it's basically, you'll see what we mean by perfect, and we're going to have an amazing roster of speakers again. We welcome interaction, and today we're sponsored and brought to you by Long Capture. We're excited about the fact that actually the CEO of Long Capture is going to be one of the speakers. For those of you that are on the platform and maybe had some problems, just to make sure, we have updated the SES platform to include the 1-minute videos, both pre and post mentoring. So please make sure when you go into your application that you've submitted, go into the edit mode. And I've confirmed with the Startup Includer team that once you go into the edit mode, these additional fields will populate or will appear, and then you can populate them. Again, if anyone has any questions like you have, please do email me, and hopefully I can be as responsive as possible. We're super excited that this iteration of SES has 66 companies participating in the competition with over 108, or I think it's actually 109 entrepreneurs. We have an amazing assortment of judges, esteemed folks in the space industry, judges, mentors, and presenters. We had 58 of them this year, volunteering from 46 companies. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to go through a quick, I'll try to be quicker today than yesterday, but I'll go through the ideas of a perfect pitch. Then Russ Long from Long Capture will go through some tips. Jonathan Fensky from Techstars will go through some traps. And then Tej Paul from Google will go through how do you pitch to stand out. And we have also an entrepreneur joining us, Mayank, that's going to share their journey of fundraising and their journey of how the pitching happened. I'll try to keep us on track timing wise. So around 20 minutes before the end, we'll have the opportunity for a discussion. And for those of the speakers that can stay on, feel free to ask questions. And then also we'll have the ability for folks to ask any questions about the process, and we'll talk about next week as well. So again, the format for this is very much open. It's as if you're standing or sitting in the conference room at a table, and feel free to get up, move around, but we want to encourage interaction. Feel free to interrupt me. I'll do my best to watch the chat as I'm speaking, and I'll also try to moderate in terms of getting questions answered in the chat. Also, feel free to turn on your cameras. Keep your microphone on mute unless you want to be recorded along with the presenters, which we've found in the past recordings unknowingly. If your microphone detects voice, it then and you have your camera on, it then puts you onto the recording. So there's probably some good surprise cameos from folks in the recordings, and enjoy it. Right, this is part of the fun. So again, to encourage a lot of interaction. Again, this is unfortunately the last time that we're all together, so please feel free to ask questions, and we'll try to make this fun. So when it comes to the pitch, basically it's also known as the presentation, and I've seen it done in multiple directions, meaning you can present your business to an investor, you can present your business to a prospect looking to buy something from you, and you can also present your business to potential employees or co-founders. It's all in focusing on whatever you're doing that's unique. And if it's talking to an investor, you want to explain how you're uniquely making money. When you're talking to a prospect in a sales opportunity, how you're uniquely going to be solving or being part of their solution if you're doing solution selling. And then if you're talking to a potential employee, you're talking to a potential co-founder or partner at why you're the best place to work. You're going to be the best company for them to join. So when you pitch, I want to stress that you actually need to look at more than just talking about the idea, but have that aspect of sales that we've talked about in the past workshop. So essentially, don't just blurt out your idea on a sheet of paper or on a screen or whatnot. It should be formatted in a way that has some logical sense to it. In terms of types of pitches, really, I've pulled this example of 4 different lengths of pitches and to categorize them. So the first one is the really short pitch, right? So it's the under 10 seconds, maybe under 140 words, you know, kind of the Twitterish type pitch. 1 or 2 catchy sentences to describe what you're doing, why you're doing it, why you're going to be the best, or what your benefits are, kind of thing. The elevator pitch is a longer version of that, And I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide, but typically it's under 30 seconds. The competition pitch is, for those of you that are going to make it to the finalist stage, is typically under 5 minutes, right? So giving you the ability to take 5 minutes of someone's time, capture their attention, and then ideally get them interested to get to the next point of whatever that process is. And then the investor pitch. Typically, there's a 30-20-10 rule where on a slide, don't use anything less than 30 fonts. Typically, it's a 20-minute pitch and use 10 slides. Now, this is not a set guideline. This is it's a recommendation. So you can make fonts bigger. Typically, don't make them smaller. You could probably go over the 20 minutes. You probably can go over 10 slides. But the idea here is keeping it succinct, keeping it lively, and keeping the interest of the person listening. So when it comes to the elevator pitch, basically, being a New Yorker, growing up around buildings, I actually grew up on the Upper West Side. We did have an elevator. Our building was 6 stories, so I just picked an average of 4 floors. The idea here is, if you're standing next to someone and you want to explain to them what you're doing, and typically the elevator ride will be about 4 floors of travel. That's maybe about 10, 20, 30 seconds at the most. In that elevator pitch, you want to say who you are, what you do, what makes you and what you do unique, and how you do it, and who needs it. It's a lot to think about in an elevator pitch in that short amount of time, but the good news is, if you have this down pat, you'll be able to do the smaller version and the larger versions easily. One word of advice, I'd say everyone in your company should be aligned with the elevator pitch, and ideally, not that they have to go up in front of people, they should be able to do this elevator pitch to anyone. I mean, it's a great thing to be able to explain to someone what you do for a living or what you're doing as an entity, as part of an entrepreneurship group. The elevator pitches are good to practice. Now, in past SES workshops, we actually had the opportunity to break out and do the elevator pitch and practice it on a table-by-table basis. But I definitely would suggest and recommend that you take the time, and you can actually Google the templates for traditional elevator pitches, but basically it's these four big bullets, and practice it and know it cold and be comfortable with it. You know, do that whole thing about smile when you say your elevator pitch. So when it comes to the anatomy of a pitch, what you really need to do in all types of pitches, whether you're pitching to investors, you're doing a sales pitch, you're pitching to prospective employees or co-founders, is find your hook. Find the hook to keep the interest of your audience, and find that quickly. I think it's a great idea to excite your audience with something new, something interesting. Be interesting, right? Be excited about what you're talking about. That excitement will permeate to your audience. You want to be credible, so you want to make sure that you have properly led the audience to believe in you. Whether you're talking about something that they're learning, if you're talking about something that they know, absolutely make sure that you are truthful, right? So you basically cannot mislead anyone in any of the interactions as an entrepreneur anyway, but specifically in a pitch. Because once you do that, the rest of the pitch is kind of put on mute. You want to take this opportunity in any pitch to qualify yourself or your entity, your business, as the expert for what you're doing. You want to be memorable. Not saying comical, but find ways for folks to remember the fact that you pitched them. And if you can take a simple approach, I know literally talking to rocket scientists on this webinar, keep it as simple as possible, because if it's simple, they can understand it regardless of who the audience is, and they can also remember it easily. Be ready after this pitch process, and we'll talk more about this, and we've spoken about this yesterday in the funding process. Be ready with answers, and that's pretty much called the due diligence process, right? Typically, you'll be asked about the management team, who are the experts on your team, what customers you guys plan on having, so what customer discovery you've done, or who do you have customers now. It's good to know your competition. It's absolutely important when you're pitching to be able to explain what is the economics behind your revenue, what's your business model. Ideally, you're going to be growing your company, so it's good to have an idea of what your plans are for growth. Everyone's going to have a curve that curves up, right? It's going to be a time when that slope starts kicking in. Be able to explain when that's going to happen. If you're doing an investment presentation or pitch, you should be at least able to present what does the deal look like? What are you looking for? What are you offering in return? Not saying bring up all your negotiations right then and there, or bring up your valuation or anything. At least seed the information to your audience about what the deal structure is like. And again, you obviously are not going to commit to an exit strategy, but be able to address if the question comes up about exit strategy, or why you're doing what you're doing, and what ultimately are you going to do with your company. When you're talking to an investor, and I loved Michael's presentation yesterday, there's a part of it of what you say and what they actually hear. So if you talk about why your product, market size, and solution, typically this is from the investor's perspective, they're thinking about, is there money to be made in this process, right? So, and how much? They're starting to quantify. They're validating what you're saying. If you mention things like go-to-market, competition, financial projections, now you're talking about things that are going to make the audience think about how much money can be made. So the first part is prove to me that there's a market, prove to me that there's money to be made. And then the second part is how much of it is going to be possibly made through this investment or through this relationship that the investor is going to undertake with you. And then the last grouping is talking about the team and the ask. It's really having the investor start thinking about, is this the group of people that are going to actually do this and execute on it? Are they going to make me this money? And depending on what you're asking for, do they know what they need to survive? So it's really important to at least have these general ideas in your pitch, but then think about when you say them, how they get accepted or interpreted by your audience. Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just jump in, type them in the chat. It's really hard, the interaction here. I see a lot of little dots. So please ask me anything. So my quick summary here of some tips, at least from my perspective, and we're going to hear from a really cool group of presenters after me. Plan ahead. Don't raise money, or don't pitch thinking you're going to raise money immediately when you're desperate, right? It's kind of like that philosophy of don't go shopping in the supermarket when you're hungry. You're going to buy a lot more stuff than you actually planned for.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What's Spacecom's elevator pitch?
For Spacecom itself, or for this summit? I'm not representing Spacecom, the conference.
Okay, let's go for the conference then. Have you given a thought to that?
I can do it quick. Let's see. Spacecom's Entrepreneur Summit is a program that enables entrepreneurs to learn and grow their business, grow their businesses through meeting experts and getting feedback on their approach. So you kind of go through what it is. It's a program of series of programs by doing this, and what's the benefit. Did that work? Was it a fumble?
I think for a first shot, it was excellent.
Okay, thanks.
Stefan?
Yeah, here you go. James will do it.
No, it's James. It's a great question. And the quick answer, my 3 seconds is accelerating the global business of space. That is what Spacecom is all about. Accelerating the global business of space.
By offering right the conference, right? Or
Of course,
yes,
And
yeah.
having an international platform with entrepreneurs, industry, and frankly, financial institutions represented. But the quick answer is accelerating the global business of space.
So just again, I would love to at some point, if you wanted to share, and maybe this is something we can do in the workshops next week, is I know you're doing your 1 minute video, but maybe as part of that 15 minutes or so, everyone should do their elevator pitch, right? Just to get the feedback from the different mentors next week. We'll add that to the agenda for next week. So good question. And thanks, James. So when it comes to fundraising, it requires the storytelling, it's the sales process, it's building rapport. Word of caution, it's going to take longer than you think, right? It's absolutely, it's going to, whatever you plan for it, just plan for not only taking longer than you think, but also taking your attention away from something else that you might be doing running the company. It's important to establish and share mutual respect. So I'm a big fan of diligence should be both ways. As much as you're getting asked questions about your company, you should know about that, whether it's the investor, the sales, if it's sales, your prospect, or if you're interviewing, you should know about that person, right? So it's about discovery, but it's about sharing that mutual respect. You want to delight and excite in your presentation. To remind everyone, in all these pitches, there's people on both sides, whether it's a negotiation or a conversation or a sales presentation, it's people. Be respectful, act like and respect the fact that there's someone else listening. So there's going to be some personal stuff going on. Has to be. The rapport has to be built. And when it comes to fundraising, if you're talking to an investor specifically, and you know a bunch of risks are going to happen or potentially can happen, right? You don't want to have any surprises come up. So it's important to identify the risks, or at least identify them and talk about how you're going to mitigate those risks. Because at the end of the day, the decision is going to be made by the investor to make an investment, ideally addressing or minimizing the risks for their investment, right? So it's a risky part of any company's cycle to be on the startup or early stage. So investors are trying to at least understand and quantify their risks, and that's why the returns should be higher. So fundraising is hard, and pitching is part of it. Hopefully you'll get a good feel and good practice of it. You should be comfortable in it. If you're not comfortable in it, my recommendation is find the person in your group, in your company, in your co-founder list that is the most comfortable fundraising, doing the pitching. But everyone should be at least knowledgeable of the process. Any questions?
Yes, Stefan.
Yeah, sure.
I have a question in regards to addressing the market in the 1 minute pitch. I mean, if you have, for instance, like we're looking at right now, going through a whole discovery process of the different types of companies that might be interested in what it is that we're offering. Is that something? How specific should we get into that as far as the 1 minute pitch? Is that something that comes later, or is that something that should be part of the initial presentation? What's your opinion on that?
I think again, you're saying that it's a growing market. There's an opportunity, right? So I don't think you have time to quantify it, but
okay.
Yeah, you want to show that the inertia is there to grow. But again, it's more, you know, along the lines of, this is your overview. It's the ability for you to show that there is a reason you're doing this, and then it ultimately isn't going to diminish. The need's not going to go away, or the fact that people are going to give you money is not going to go away because of what you're doing. It's only going to get more important and bigger opportunity.
Okay, thank you. The demand's growing for what it is you're
Demand's
offering.
growing, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Well, appreciate the questions, and I'll watch again on the chat for anything that comes up. It's my pleasure to introduce Russ Long. Russ is the founder and CEO of Long Capture. And Russ, are you going to be presenting from your computer, or
Yeah,
you have a
that'd
presentation?
be my preference if
Great, that'd be great. Jackson, if you can give Russ the presenter. Are you on a Mac or Windows or?
Windows.
Okay, great, because the Mac requires a couple of reboots or something, we found out. So thanks for joining us, Russ. We're really excited to.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is very cool.
Great.
All right, now let's see if I can actually move it and get full screen here.
Okay, the webinar platform is yours.
Okay, well, here we go. Thanks, everybody. So my role here this morning is to talk about some specific tips in giving your pitch. The flavor and experience that I'm going to bring is more of pitching to the government, and I'll talk a bit about why that is. I think a lot of the tips that I'll discuss this morning will carry over and be useful to think about when you're pitching to VCs or doing something in the private sector as well. So why? I always like to start with, why am I giving this presentation? Why I've included the information that I am. And what you guys need to understand is that within the Department of Defense, and especially within Air Force and Space Force, which is obviously very interesting to a lot of you, there's been over 15 what they call pitch days since 2019. So, what information and data is out there is always a bit delayed. So we have the numbers from 2019, over $131 million spent in 2019 through these pitch days. So again, companies are going and actually presenting and pitching to the government, where they decide and make oftentimes same day contract awards to these companies. So it's definitely, in the last 2 to 3 years, a very new way of doing business. Is becoming much more mainstream, and other federal agencies and other military branches are really starting to pick up this type of kind of industry and private practice and using it to award their government contracts. And so I think, again, with this forum, something we've seen, one of the major players is Space Force Pitch Day. If you guys didn't apply for it already, I won't get into too much of the details of this, but if you didn't apply for it already, it is in process right now this year. But it's something that seems like they at least intend on doing each year. So be on the lookout on how to go and apply for Space Force Pitch Day. And this is one of the main forums I'm talking about, where I think this year at Space Force Pitch Day, they'll spend at least 30 to potentially $40 million in one event, where all these pitch day events are targeting companies a lot like yours, where it's a commercially focused technology, or at least there's a commercial use case. They're very interested in companies that are raising private investment that can also solve some problems for the Department of Defense or the Space Force or the Air Force. So again, a lot of crossover between industry and pitching to VCs, and this whole concept of pitching to the government. The other piece I'd like to hit on just very briefly, now that you know why we're here, is who the heck am I to tell you how to pitch. So through these different pitch days, I've worked with and coached 40 different companies going to these events, and they've won over $45 million worth of contracts. So again, my perspective, very, very much focused and leans to working with these specific pitch days. But again, I think a lot of principles will hold true to industry as well. All right, going into the pitch, I think a lot of these points have been touched on already. So thanks for hitting that this morning and making my job easy. But especially with the government, they use something called evaluation criteria. So it's in the past, very formal solicitation process They have a lot of different formatting requirements, all these different pieces. A lot of that is still kind of pulled into these pitch days and the pitches that these companies are giving to the government. So overall, when you go and you pitch to the government, you have to understand the evaluation criteria. And the way a lot of these solicitations and the processes work to get you to these pitch days, I think is very confusing. So overall, there's a lot of, like I said, different formatting, different proposal processes, but you have to understand is what's always a little bit separate is their evaluation criteria. And it's not always obvious, in my opinion. So you need to spend some time, find that evaluation criteria, because that's actually how they grade you. It's how they write it up. So again, it just doesn't always match. So go hunting, spend time, internalize that evaluation criteria, because that's how the government has to document their decision. The other piece is know who you're evaluating. This can be difficult sometimes going into these events, but again, as much as possible, do the research to figure out what the evaluation board's background is. What's their level of understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve? It could be that they're high ranking, high level, and so maybe they have a very broad perspective on the problem you're trying to solve, but they don't understand the specific details or maybe the ramifications of the problem that you're trying to solve. And again, that helps you as you craft your pitch to them. And like, what level of detail are you going to get into? What assumptions do you make about their understanding of the problem? So again, taking some time, set the context as you go in to build your presentation and give your pitch. And I don't have a whole too many more slides, so I really wanted to leave it open to ask some different questions at the end. So what I like to hit on is, all right, let's talk about the actual pitch itself. Again, especially when you're pitching to the government, these people, they're the warfighter. They're putting their lives at risk. If not, their coworkers, family members, like they are the ones doing the job. So what I often see is people will just kind of jump into the technology or jump into problems or whatever else. The presentation tends to be extremely focused on the company and how great the company is. Especially when you start that way, you're going to lose your audience. So the hero of the story, the point I'm trying to make here is you have to focus on that warfighter and understanding that problem, spelling out that problem and why that problem matters. So again, when you're going and you're talking to the Air Force and the Space Force, it could be that people's lives are at risk. It could be that there's multi-$100 million, billion-dollar programs wasting a lot of money on a solution that you can already provide commercially for a much lower price point and much more efficiently. I mean, when I worked in the Air Force many years ago at Space and Missile Systems Center, it was taking us 8 years to get a satellite into space. Crazy. Industry is blowing that out of the water constantly. So again, understand, let me circle back. Understand that the warfighter and this problem is the key focus. So let me give a quick example that I've seen just over and over again. Someone will start their presentation. They'll say, well, my name's Joe, and I started my company, Panda Technologies, back in 1997. And I just started in the garage, and I had a couple of engineers, really great engineering experience. It is so boring. You've already lost the evaluation team at that point. But if you can, again, highlight and hook them right away of like, here's the problem. We understand your problem. We understand that there's lives at risk or millions of dollars on the line related to this specific problem. Then at that point, that's when you can start talking about your solution and your technology. That's when you can start talking about your team, but it all has to fit this narrative. It all has to build and push towards this kind of overall story that you're telling, that here's this major problem, we can solve it, and here's why. We have the great engineering expertise. We've built and taken other products to market. We've worked with the Department of Defense before. Whatever it is that sets you apart from other companies and other solutions. And again, this is a bit obvious, I think, especially on the industry side, but I've seen it a lot on the government where people don't ask. You get to the end of the presentation and it just kind of falls off. Thanks for watching today. There's got to be an ask. So in the cases of these pitch days, it's like, if you give me this $750,000 contract, if you give me this $3 million contract, we're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z to, again, solve this problem. You're going back to that original, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Here are the steps that we can take towards that if you give me this funding. So again, many people probably find it obvious. I've seen a lot of people just completely leave it out. So keep that in mind. All right, these are a bit more administrative. And again, some of this was hit on earlier this morning. The audience can only be as excited as you are. And especially in a virtual environment, I think people have an even harder time with it. So whatever your energy level is, like if you are way down here, you're commanding the room, you're commanding that pitch. So if you're just not that excited about the technology, if your energy levels are low, it's really difficult for the evaluation team to be up here, for the people receiving the pitch to be more excited about this than you are. So bring that energy, get excited about this problem that you're solving, get excited about your solution that you can bring, and bring that energy level up so you can get people excited. The other thing I see, especially again on this government side, people will put blocks and blocks of text, just paragraphs. Don't do that. The whole point is that you're getting in front of the audience to present, to have that interaction. They can get a feel for you, for your tech, for your team. Don't distract them by putting a novel on your slides behind you. Again, see that all the time. Finally, for the foreseeable future, I think we're going to have to deal with this, and we're going to see a lot more of these virtual pitches, So please, please, please look at the camera. Eye contact is this. People will be looking over here. They'll be looking over here. Make your setup, if you're going to do a virtual pitch, so that you can actually look at the camera. And you can think about things like lighting. If there's a lot of money at stake, the better it looks. This is not great having a bunch of backlight. So do as I say, not as I do. But yeah, if you're going to pitch to government, pitch to VC, think about your setup. Make sure they're not staring up your nose the whole presentation. Spend a little bit of time to fix your setup. So, those are really just some quick tips. I see these issues all the time. People spending too much time talking about themselves, talking about their company without ever getting to what is the problem that they're solving. Spend a lot of time doing the research and building your presentation to tell that story. So with that said, I think I will jump into the chat function. I think there's a couple questions there. How would you like to do your Q&A?
I have a question.
Okay.
When you have a team that comes to you for advice, what typically are their mistakes? You mentioned several when you were going through your presentation, but what would you recommend to them that consistently across the board that companies need to do to present a lot better? Thank you.
Yeah, so this whole perspective comes from all these pitches that I've seen, but also proposals. We've seen hundreds of proposals over the last couple of years at this point to the Department of Defense, and very, very similar principles are an issue there. So again, companies are rightfully so, but they're too eager to jump in and just spend pages and pages and pages talking about their technology in depth. There are some certain circumstances where that is the right thing to do, but again, you got to know your evaluator. And a lot of my experience with the Air Force, and again with these pitch days, the folks that are evaluating you don't have that huge depth of knowledge. So if you spend most of your pitch talking about the nitty-gritty details of your technology, which again, they're important, but you're going to lose your evaluator, whether that's in the proposals or whether that's in the pitch. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Hi, Ross. This is Zubi with Think and Zoom. Thanks so much for spending time and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us this morning. I have quite a kind of a different kind of question, actually more personal. I'm disabled, I'm visually impaired and legally blind, and coincidentally, that's also the problem we're trying to solve. Now, when dealing with remote presentations, well, being that I'm halfway blind, it's always a nightmarish kind of fumbling situation, right? Struggling to see what to press, etc. Do you have any tips on how I can, just gracefully enter into pitching situations? Do I be vulnerable to the audience and tell them the situation, or do I just find different ways of just handling the situation and just, fighting through it? What do you suggest?
I mean, I think just being open and honest is the best approach. So letting them know, hey, there may be a couple of technical difficulties, maybe hard to find the mute and unmute button, like whatever it is that could be more challenging. I think it's totally fine to just be upfront and clear about that, especially in this virtual environment. I think people have been a lot more open and warm to just, technical difficulties in general. And, kids running into the room or dogs barking because we're all stuck at home. I just think people have a bit of a different perspective thanks to last year. So I think it's best to address it. If you're growing as a team, perhaps there are certain people that are more charismatic than others. You can always lean on and find those different folks with different expertise as well. But I was a sole founder for over a year, so I get it. You got to do everything yourself. So yeah, hope that helps.
Thanks so much for your input. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hi, Russell. I have a question. In a world focused on technology, I bring in a pitch for a method of doing things.
Good.
And how would you? We do have the method in the early stages of being patented, but how would you pitch that in kind of, I'm going to say, an audience that wants the latest and shiniest AI plus ML plus whatever 3 letters you can pitch into a face? And I do have proof of concept already, but I would really like to know that, because the method works, it's fantastic. It's not yet in space, but how would you say, go for this or go for that? What's the sauce?
That's a really interesting question. Because what I've seen, everyone's just focusing on this, on technology. It's very technology heavy. But at the same time, a lot of these programs are centered around research and development. So again, taking a look at what's in the solicitation, what the flavor of that evaluation criteria is, I think it might be hard to kind of get your foot in the door in some of these specific pitch days that I'm talking about. But if you're able to actually present, I think that depending on the method, but my guess is that you can make a lot of different technologies or processes more efficient and more productive. So it's almost like you're not just bringing another technology that solves a small problem. You're addressing a larger, maybe systemic problem, and how we approach implementing these tech solutions. Kind of grasping in the dark, I'm just guessing here, but overall, I think you might be able to leverage that you could touch multiple technologies and make multiple different technologies or processes, or whatever it is, more efficient and productive, and approach it from that angle. So it's not that you're just solving one problem, it's that you have the potential to solve a wide.
So you'd go for the ecosystem solving versus the detail on the system. Is that?
So you want to still, for these programs that I'm familiar with, the way the DoD is approaching this, I would say you still want to have sort of some tech approach, and it may be that your approach, your method, is going to increase the likelihood of success of all these different technologies. So you're still kind of roping in this emphasis on technology and getting more out of our technology, out of our new the different pushes to modernize and pull in new technology. Is that, what do you think about that?
It helps. Go wide and go deep. Understood. Thank you very much.
I have a question for you, Russell. I got a selected but not funded for my pitch day phase one, and I am struggling to interpret this reality I now find myself in, because should I interpret that as a straightforward, we liked it but we didn't have room for you, or should I interpret this as we liked it but we didn't like it that much? I'm not sure between those two realities which I'm currently in.
Yeah, so honestly, we've been seeing this select not funded status, just to bring everyone up to speed. So a lot of these pitch days are going through SBIRs as kind of the entry point. And again, even other agencies outside of the Department of Defense I've seen start playing around with these pitch days. I think they've really identified kind of the SBIR program as a playground for innovation, which it should be. So hopefully we'll continue to see this. But what Mike's talking about specifically is applying for these pitch days, applying for SBIR, whatever it might be. They're now doing this weird status where you're kind of stuck in purgatory. It's not good, but it's not bad either. Select unfunded. So my interpretation, again, we haven't heard much directly from the Air Force or Department of Defense on this. Hypothetically, you could get someone to bring money to the table and drop it on this contract. All of the legwork, which can take months to build this contract award, has been done. So all they need is to drop money on it. Now, I'm not saying I've really seen that done. There's just not much guidance out there on how to take advantage of it. So overall, it's frustrating, honestly, because you can't go and get like a debrief and get feedback. I would, again, do some more research about your problem, who the end users might be, learn as much as you can about the evaluation criteria and process, and just brush it off and submit again, I think is your best shot. So,
okay, there's no way I can, because it honestly seems a little bit odd that they give me $50K just to go to a pitch day. I'd be willing to go to the pitch day without the $50K. Is that not an option?
That is just a silly acquisition process. And we talked to the Space Force a lot about different ways that they can kind of funnel companies in, because they did look at potentially just having a phase two, kind of like what you're saying, like let's just put in a proposal, maybe get down selected and go directly to the pitch day. The way they wanted to run this is going through the phase one to the phase two pitch day. So unfortunately, that's not an option. They continue to play with the model, so I hope it will be in the future. Keep an eye out on future rounds of these SBIRs, because there are several that are just what's called direct to phase two. You're going after that $750,000 proposal, and that is directly like just a pitch day. So you don't have to do all this phase one junk. It's just you're selected or you're not selected to go out for a pitch day.
Cool, thank you, man.
I had a question, Russell, if it's all right. If we have time for one more, which is just when you're applying to specific agencies, SBIR, like the Air Force or the Space Force, how much does involvement with other branches matter? Like if you say, hey, we've got this contract going on with the Navy, developing one aspect of our technology, we'd like to get this other aspect going with the Air Force. Is that, I know you have to list it in the related work section and that, but does it carry weight? And also, Mike, we were also selected and not funded, so you're in good company here. It's just part of the process, I think.
Yeah, so what I would say is, and I totally just blanked. Can you rephrase your question?
Yeah, I'm just asking how much weight does interaction with other branches carry?
Sorry, thank you. I got stuck on the select unfunded again. So commercial traction, investment, work with other branches does, all of that helps build legitimacy that like, hey, we started to prove out this technology, we have traction in other places. In my opinion, from working with this program quite a bit, I think that having commercial traction and private investment is a bit better. Navy is definitely still a feather in your cap, and you should highlight it. I also think civilian agencies could hold a little bit more interest just from the way they kind of approach this this program. So if you're doing some stuff with NASA, for example, you can kind of pitch it as, you know, you don't want the Air Force or Space Force to miss out on the stuff that NASA's already doing with you, you know, and that certainly lends a lot of legitimacy as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Russ, for sharing your time and your experience and expertise, and also thank you for sponsoring this workshop. So, and Russ, will you be able to answer questions if people have them online on the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll hang out. I want to see these other pitch presentations as well. But yeah,
Awesome.
I'll be in the chat.
Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Fenske. Jonathan's Managing Director from Techstars, and he's going to be talking about pitching traps. So Jackson, if we can give Jonathan presenter capability, that'd be great.
Hopefully you guys can hear me. Let's see.
We can hear you, and the warning is you're on a Mac, so you're going to have to probably open up and do a lot of permission stuff. So
yeah, I'm trying to do that right now. You know, there's an old saying, right? If you want to do what Steve Jobs wants you to do, you use Mac. If you want to do what you want to do, you use Android. So I fell into the trap of Steve Jobs back in the day.
Jonathan, thanks for joining us. And again, the format here is casual. It's just like, you know, when we go up and do this in an actual room, everyone plugging in, there's always some kind of fun to have. So I'll use this opportunity real quick to maybe do the elevator pitch again for Space Comms Entrepreneur Summit while Jonathan's getting set up here. So at SES, we help and find opportunities for the most exciting and innovative commercial space startups in the world to collaborate and I lost my train of thought here. Basically, let's see. So we help and find at SES. We help and find. We find and help grow the most exciting and innovative commercial space startups in the world to help humanity. How about that? So, any questions while Jonathan's getting set up here?
This is Bernard here. I was just gonna ask Russ, what are your, I posted it in the chat box there, what are your thoughts on framing a story around your pitch? I mean, you referred to it a bit, and some people have talked about it, but in general, people do like to seem to have your 10-page deck or your 25-page deck, and this is your marketing, and this is your market, this is your team, and there's no real story there. That's just like the hardcore facts.
I think that's a great way to open. Like if you can tell the story of an airman that may have lost their life or was put in extreme danger because of legacy software, old technology, whatever it might be, I think that'll go a long way to showing like that your technology can be impactful. And I think that certainly is a hook with these government evaluators. So I think that's a great approach. And then from there, like once they understand like this can have very significant impact, then that's why they're going to be very interested to hear about your technology and hear about your team and how you guys think you can solve the problem.
Okay, yeah, so just within maybe one slide or just one topic, and then move back to the hard data.
Yeah, 30 seconds, no longer than a minute, just to say like, hey, here's a quick story. So like it's anecdotal, but I think a way to really round that out is like, you know, here's a specific story of a real life incident. This is systemic, and you can show that there's maybe thousands of people that are put at risk, or it's an enterprise-wide issue, whatever it might be. So you've hit the personal, emotional element, and then you've hit the broader, and please tell me to shut up if you're ready to present. So you've hit the broader systemic enterprise issue as well. So it's not like you're trying to just solve this one tiny little problem. the whole story's there.
Oh my, did it
Okay,
work?
gotcha. Thanks.
You're on. Yes, you are.
All right, so in the spirit of being informal, I'm not actually going to put this in presentation mode. I'm going to roll through it like this, like a old terrible person who doesn't know how to use PowerPoint. So, you can hate me for it, but this is how I like to roll when we're doing informal stuff, so I can go back and forth and all that jazz. For those that don't know me, I'm a space scientist by training. I grew up in the National Lab System, FFRDCs, and national labs like the Applied Physics Lab. I've started and sold multiple companies in deep tech and dual use technologies. I used to have advisors like the former head of NASA and deputy director of CIA and Los Alamos and NGA and stuff like that. So, and I've run an accelerator for Techstars last year in space with the US and Europe. I've also been an angel investor for a bunch of years, and I've raised tens of millions of dollars of other people's money and gotten tens of millions of dollars of government grants along the way through SBIRs. So this is some hard-won advice on pitching, and hopefully it's useful. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really familiar with GoToMeeting. Maybe there's a way to like interrupt me, ask questions, do whatever. Please do that. Like it's totally informal. It's all good. And you might already know some of these things, but I want to really, kind of drive it home. And for what it's worth, I apologize ahead of time. I'm a little bit irreverent and I swear a lot. So if that offends you, I apologize, but I'll try to be good. Is that cool? I can't see a lot of faces here, so I'm going to assume there's like thumbs up or something, like it's all good. Right on. Okay, so straight up, who are you pitching to? Know your audience, right? What this means practically is it a group of government people? Is it VCs? Do they normally invest in early stage stuff, late stage stuff? Maybe it's a customer, right? And maybe you're actually pitching a potential partnership. So think about, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? How do they make decisions? Because in almost every pitch, especially one for money, they're templating you, okay, trust, don't trust. Gonna make me a lot of money, not gonna make me a lot of money, right? Like they're already having preconceived notions, and so you wanna understand that audience. Again, happened to have played a lot of soccer growing up. You really wanna know what your goal is, because you're gonna have an ask at the end. If you want money, you better be ready to ask for it. If you want a partnership, if you want to get something, you can't tiptoe around it. You got to be very deliberate and direct. Okay. And so the thing we always talk about is like, entertain me, impress me, get to yes, and then get out. Right. So if the goal is to get another meeting, get to yes, get that meeting, and then get out. Right. Because every minute after that, you've accomplished your goal, you could be taking away value from the partnership or the investment or whatever. For those that aren't terribly familiar, just like in songwriting, there's sort of like, there's the hook and the wheel, and there's these pieces. A pitch has a good format, right? You have an intro, you normally have a demo, you normally have something about your business, and then your ask or your landing. And so there are lots of resources on the internet. Look at like Andreessen Horowitz has like a pitch order deck. There's stuff from DocSend around typical progression, but don't try to reinvent the wheel here. Do the formula that people are used to seeing so that it looks familiar and feels familiar. It's easy, right, to bring it home. Key piece, right? You got to build credibility when you're doing the intro. So maybe it's something about your background, maybe it's something about your experience. Hopefully it's something like this. When it comes to a problem or a pain, you don't say, I think it was painful, or I think this is a problem. You say, I talked to 300 people, and what I learned is that this is fucking painful. Then people perk up, they get on what I call your side of the table. They're like, oh, tell me more, this is interesting, right? So think about how you're gonna create credibility. And I'll just say one point on that for a credibility thing. It's not, I've been doing this 30 years, right? A lot of people talk about how many years the team has of, aggregate experience. Like, congratulations, I'm really happy you've been working on this problem for a long time, but it's more about your empathy with your customer or the problem, not how many years you've been doing it. So just be thinking about that when you introduce yourself and creating your brand. Investors specifically want to know what your experiences are and what you've learned as a result of those experiences. Remember, again, I'm a PhD scientist guy, right? There's book learning, and then there's experiential learning. And the integral of experiential learning is intuition. This is what builds trust. I've been doing this a long time. Here's what I've learned. This is why I believe, right, in this, software solution, this new hardware thing, this opportunity, right? And that's part of your baseline credibility. Hey, I had 2 other companies before, or like when I started out, I didn't know anything about business. I said, hey, I've gotten, tens of millions of dollars of government grants. It's basically like being an entrepreneur. I had to frame the idea, convince other people to give me money, and then execute to create value. And so investors were like, oh, okay, cool, right? That gave some credibility. In the intro section, when you're talking about the problem, again, I'm speaking specifically about investors. We can talk more about how to do government stuff if you like, if there's a few minutes. But basically, you want them to be like, oh, that's really interesting. Peter Thiel calls this the earned secret, something that if you told people would be obvious, but until you tell them, they don't think about it that way, right? Like organizing all the web domains to make them searchable on the internet. It's like a really good fucking idea, but before Google, it wasn't really prosecuted properly. Those kind of things help investors go, aha. Once they have their aha moment, they're going to want to invest and work with you. Okay. And then the other thing, and this comes down to 3 questions, right? Why you? Why now? Why this? Right? So if you can answer those 3 questions, and especially so what, people are going to get interested. To be blunt, if you're building the next bio, nano, photonic, AI driven, who gives a fuck? So who cares? If you're doing it to solve a specific problem, which is painful for a specific group of people, even if it's niche, you'll be able to expand that into a broader set of use cases as you grow, and investors and others will see why that's valuable, right? And the explanation, this gets into storytelling. So be interesting, right? Again, just for background, investors, their funds tend to be 10 to 12 years long. The average marriage in the US lasts about 7 years. They're literally marrying you. And they're like, I got to go to board meetings. I got to interact with this founder. It's going to be a long journey. Do I want to be on that bus with them taking that journey? And generally, interesting people are more fun to be around. So be interesting. Okay. And then here's some ideas if you're not familiar, right? A cool fact that gets people thinking, a personal story. Like, for example, my house was destroyed with me and my family in it during Hurricane Maria in 2017. I almost died. I had no power and water for 3 months. Now, anything I say after that, by the way, that's true. Like, oh, this person is resourceful. They survived trauma. They've overcome some adversity. It builds empathy, right? If you're funny, don't try to be artificially funny, right? But it's okay to be awkward or like to be a nerd or whatever. But like, be maybe not self-deprecating, but like be comfortable with who you are. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Be authentic, right? And then the other thing is maybe you've thought about your problem really and profoundly, and that whole make me go, that's interesting, right? That builds a connection. Key piece, right? Storytelling. Simon Sinek, who's, if you guys don't know, start with why, he's kind of a famous management consulting guy, right? He always says people buy why you're doing something, not what you're doing, right? So your story of why is critical at the early stage of investment, before Series A. Investors and people are investing in you and your team, right? And your story. So I have here, this you have to go look it up online. You can go, search YouTube or whatever, but like in different styles of pitches, you can see different companies use these techniques effectively. Techstars, we've literally had thousands of companies go through our portfolio over the years. And we have demo days, right, where these 10 companies pitch. And so you can start to see these different trends emerge in what really works. And the one that's my favorite is called Twist the Knife, which is make the audience, make the investor, make somebody feel the pain, right? Twist that knife and like really be like, oh my God, this is so painful. Like this is obviously something we need to solve. Right. And it doesn't matter whether it's, clean energy or space travel or direct to consumer packaging, like make the pain so obvious that people go, oh, of course, like we need to be working on this. Now, in many cases, the demo section, I mean, in pitching, there's a demo section a lot of times, but in many cases, this also applies to like getting customers, right? You may have something that exists. If you can't show me, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't fucking exist. So if you can't demo it to me, if you can't send me a login, if you can't show me a video of it, if you can't hold up a 1/10 model 3D printed of it, it doesn't exist. So show, don't tell. That's how you build credibility, right? A lot of this investors and people see in the government all day long. If you have demos, if you have stuff out on the internet people can see, it builds trust and transparency. Okay, so again, I don't know if this is actually going to play from an old demo, but one of the key pieces, let's see if this will play. Well, if I ever you connect your services, otherwise what you love. You connect to a social network, every level is a friend. This gives us we analyze the tasting of social brand, and we match logically with different friends on the show, and even friends who might be good adults. And then we make it very easy for you in that room so you can get the conversation started around the show. We call this Okay, so what you just saw there is essentially a walkthrough, right? It's a mock-up. Does he actually have the app finished, thing? No, but it gives a very short framework to see how it works and why it's useful, right? And you don't need to have a fully baked back end. You don't need to have 100,000 users, right? People can see, oh, go here, click there, do this, get value, right? So be thinking about how you can prototype things in a way that makes it shareable and demoable without necessarily having the full thing baked, right? You're being intellectually honest, but you're showing people sort of the roadmap for your product. In this case, it's an app, right? And so one of the other big pieces when you're thinking about pitching is, Jerry Maguire style, right? Show me the money. Where's the market? What's your business model? I want to convey to you something learned from Brad Feld, who's a co-founder of Techstars, who runs Foundry Group, who's pretty prolific. It's a very simple statement, right? Investors' goal is to take a bucket of money that comes from their limited partners who put money in that little bucket, and they want to turn it into a much bigger bucket of money as a function of time. So no matter how cool your bio-nanophotonic, space-based, whatever it is, thing is, an investor sees your business as sort of a black box where they put money in, and as a function of time, they get money out. If you don't want to play that game, and that's cool, by the way, I've built businesses on SBIRs and lifestyle businesses and stuff in the past. That's cool. Do that. Take non-dilutive funding from the government, have a small business, do your thing. Nothing wrong with that. It's great. I support it 110%. But if you're going to play the venture-backed capital game, you got to understand that's how VCs play the game. They need big returns for their investment to justify that bucket from their LPs. So explain to them how you're going to help them accomplish their goal, which is getting a bigger bucket of money. It's deceptively simple, but very important. Okay. The market that you're in, this is a co-founder of SendGrid, which used to be called SMTP API before they went through Techstars, and then eventually grew to a multi-billion-dollar business that went public and got bought by Twilio, right? At that time, it wasn't obvious that there was a big market for developers. Like developers was a market that you could sell stuff to, right? And they were just nerds on email. At the end of the day, they turned that nerdiness on email into a set of easily integrated tools to do your unsubscribe. So now if you click unsubscribe on any email, it's powered by SendGrid, right? So get people interested and excited about the market that could be emerging or that will emerge, or an existing market, right, that you're in. Be able to clearly articulate what is your business model? How do you make money, right? We got a free version. We convert them into a paid version called Pro, and then we have a thing we call Enterprise, which is I'll give you whatever you want as long as you give me $100 grand a year, service level agreement, right? Make it easy for investors to understand that. Differentiation, okay? Not necessarily the clothes you wear, but like how is your product different or better? I'll just say there's 5 buckets of value for an investor: team, technology, market, capital, and positioning. They go by different names depending on which VC, but those are the 5 pillars, right? Why is your team the best in the world, right? What makes them uniquely qualified? What about your technology or your product is differentiated or is going to give you a competitive advantage? What market are you in, and why is that going to be a big enough opportunity for me to invest? How much capital do you need? Are you efficient? Like, are you just going to burn all my money and leave me high and dry, or can you actually show traction with a relatively small amount of capital relative to your stage? So by the way, a Series B investor investing $50 million thinks about it as relatively small amounts of money relative to your stage, right? Whereas an angel investor, again, thinks 25K is a relatively small amount of money relative to your stage. So it's all about where you are relative to your progression as a business. And then positioning, how are you talking about your company and your position in the market? Like, you could be totally non-differentiated in other pillars, and you could be calling yourself account-based marketing in MarTech and still raise lots of money and be successful. At Techstars, this is an example of a company that went through, right, and they saw Jason Mendelson, who's a musician, who's a Foundry Group member, and they essentially recreated a music video and stuff that had happened to try to build a personal connection. And they then talked about why that team was really unique. So they stood out, you know, in the crowd, if you will. And at the end of the day, these are the kind of things that help demonstrate growth, right? You got your team, you got your differentiation. What have you done? This is an example of a timeline of, hey, we integrated 6 services, we are tracking 500,000 artists, right? We've had 130 million actions. It doesn't say anything about revenue, right? So we all know, if we're technical people, you know, there's concept of operations, there's red team reviews, there's lines of code committed, there's number of customers talked to, there's lots of things that aren't money that can demonstrate your traction, your timeline, right? Logos on a PowerPoint, another great example of traction. By the way, I have no idea how I'm doing on time, so just tell me if I'm screwing up time or other things.
We have a couple minutes left, Jonathan.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yep. Good. So I'm almost done here. The key thing, right, is the landing, the end, right? You might have pitched and you practice. You got to leave that customer, that partner, that investor with a lasting impression that they want to work with you and they think this is somebody I want to spend my time with. Remember that scarcity is what you're trying to value in terms of an exchange. So time, if somebody gives you a meeting, is an exchange of scarcity, and it's valuable. Obviously, an exchange of capital is the best. You know, do they throw you out of the office? Do they slide a check across the table? In between those two things is where most of us end up on any given pitch. Okay? Be superliminal, not subliminal, not obvious, superliminal. Beat me over the head with the key points so that I can write them down on a piece of paper and remember them. And then try to hit that landing of your pitch, right? Where they're just like, you know, you can almost see the smile or the excitement, or people will like lean in, okay? And at the end of the day, you need to make an ask, right? The call to action. If you want money from an investor, you need to give your pitch and you say, are you gonna invest in me? And then they might say, well, I've got this and this and this. This is called objections. David Cohen, one of our co-founders and managing director, you know, said essentially the goal is to overcome objections and get a conditional yes. So if they say we need to see X, Y, Z things, you say, well, assuming that I can deliver or demonstrate those, will you invest in me? And the goal is to get a conditional yes, and then of course deliver on those things if you're looking for that investment. Last piece here, which is more of a important thing, is really your delivery is everything. If you're boring and slow and you're not into it, nobody else is going to be into it. As it relates to technical audiences, please don't give me complex charts, right? This sucks. You might be in love with your technology. If you show something like this, I'm never going to invest in you, ever. Why? Because it shows you're more in love with your technology than your customer. Show me something like this that's obvious, that's a macro thing, and then we can dive into the details later if I buy into your framework, okay? And the last thing that you probably all know by now, but it's important to reiterate, is you can't read and listen, right? So don't try to get people, this is not a science experiment. People are not in there like this. Talk to them like people, have the slideware almost as a little backup or a thing. It's really a conversation. So I'm gonna stop there, see if there's any questions, see if I can be helpful. Shameless plug, I'm running a space-based accelerator program with a bunch of awesome partners in the summer. So if any of you are deep tech or dual use founders that are looking for access to opportunity, please apply to my Starburst Space Accelerator. Applications are open now.
Jonathan, can you put that info in the chat?
Yes, I will do that.
That's awesome, great. And then you'll be able to provide a PDF of the slides to me,
Yep.
so I can read it. Way cool. We have time for one quick question if anyone has it. Well, Jonathan, if you can just stay on, maybe somebody might want to ask you a question in the chat for a couple minutes. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
I'm gonna stay on.
I
Let me
feel
just
bad asking all the questions, but I will ask a question.
Okay, great. And then while we're doing that,
what's going on, man?
Yeah, hey, dude. So I love profanity personally in pitches. I feel like it immediately puts you into a different place. Of course, you have to know the audience you're speaking to, but generally, I want to say thank you for cursing. Yeah. So I guess my question to you is, has that ever gone wrong for you? Because I love it. I love cursing in pitches. I've had nothing but good experiences.
Well, I would say my entire life is just a series of events gone wrong. I mean, that's sort of entrepreneurship. It's like learning what not to do. But the reality is, I always say, be authentic, right? So I'm authentic, whether I'm pitching or whether I'm talking to founders or my family, or whatever. I try to be respectful of the audience, but again, if you listen to like The Hard Thing About Hard Things or read that book by Ben Horowitz, you get a really good snippet about culture and being authentic in that book, related to that.
And I want to reinforce that what Jonathan said: be authentic, be comfortable, but be respectful to your audience. So great, thank you, Jonathan.
Hi, Stefan. Is it too late to ask a quick one, or should I just type it in the chat?
If we can hold it to maybe the end, or if you want to just put it in the chat, maybe Jonathan can jump on it. That'd be great.
Thanks so much.
Sure, thanks. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Tejpal Latia, a good friend, Office of CIO at Google, a longtime participant in SES workshops. Tej, the webinar is yours.
Great. Can you guys hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Slides are visible?
Yes.
Great. So, hi, everyone. My name is Tej. Thanks for having me. My title is variable, depending on the slide you look at. Right now, we're going by Executive Relations, Office of the CIO at Google. Really, what my job is to build relationships with Fortune 100 CEOs, CTOs, CIOs, and tell our Google story about the pandemic response, the shift to work from home, and the eventual return to office and the future of work. And this is a very new role for the company, I think for the industry, and definitely for me. I'll give you my background in a second, but I do not have large company experience. I do not have executive experience, at least not at the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 level. Nor do I have like communications experience, in the corporate sense. But when this opportunity was presented to me back in April, when COVID-19 was hitting its peak, although we might be beyond that peak in the second wave, I jumped at the opportunity for a couple of reasons. One is, while I didn't have any of this experience, the story about the corona response, working from home, what we're all kind of going through right now, the fact that we're doing this virtually right now, where the last 2 years in Houston were an incredible time for us. This is a story that I felt I could really wrap my head around, be passionate about, and tell the story for the first time, because literally nobody in the world has experienced this before, yet everyone in the world can relate. So, once I got the job and I accepted it, I asked the chief executive, I said, why would you pick me? It kind of doesn't make sense. And they said, we need someone who's a good storyteller. And it kind of clicked, and it reminded me immediately, Stefan, I don't know if you remember this, when we first met, this was maybe 4.5 years ago at Pershing Square Cafe in New York. I sat down with Stefan and I said, hey, I really want to get involved in the space industry, but I'm not a billionaire and I'm not a rocket scientist. And Stefan's response, and it'll always stick with me, is like, there's a lot of white space between those two things. And, both billionaires and rocket scientists could really use the skill of storytelling that you picked up. And never did I think that would, result in it being my job, but it actually does make a lot of sense. And I'll just quickly give you my background. Like many of you, most of you, I'm a founder. I started 3 companies over 10 years. All 3 of my companies were investor backed. All 3 saw significant scale. We sold one company, we shut one company down. One company raised a ton of VC money, is profitable, and hopefully, will create a lot of value for everyone. But a few years ago, I decided, I was done being a founder. It's very hard, and didn't really know what I was going to do next. And I got a call from Citibank, particularly Citi Ventures, the Citibank's VC arm, and they hired me to be an entrepreneur in residence. To teach executives at Citibank how to think more like startup founders. Now, I don't have any finance background. Actually, being from New York, I probably have a pretty big prejudice or bias against finance as a culture, or the finance industry as a culture. Many of those biases proved true, but it was a really cool experience for me. And I created this deck while I was there, while I was talking to these executives in the finance industry, and it used to be called How to Pitch. And Stefan actually renamed it this year to Pitching to Stand Out, which is much more accurate, because what this deck is not, it's not a framework. You got a lot of awesome insight over the last couple of days. Sunil yesterday, Michael Mealing gave some talks about what investors are looking for, how they break down. This morning, you got some really great insights from masters at this, pitching to the government, pitching, with all that experience at Techstars. This deck is not going to give you kind of like, hey, follow this formula. If anything, this deck is helping you be you, right? Telling your story, being your authentic self. And honestly, that's not necessarily something you can teach. However, I created this deck based on over 1,000 pitches I've given. And these are specifically pitches for fundraising or acquisition. And these are real pitches, 1,000 times, every fundraise for me was talking to well over 100 investors to get, a handful to pitch in. Same thing when we sold the company. And out of these 1,000 pitches, I've estimated, actually it's exact, that 28 were successful. So my goal, whether it was to raise money or sell the company, it was achieved 28 out of those 1,000 times. Now, it doesn't mean those other 972 were terrible pitches, although probably many were really bad. Only 28 actually resulted. And fortunately, there were the 28 that I needed. And this series of slides is going to share with you what I learned from those 28 that worked, and more importantly, from those 972 that didn't. And like I said, specifically for fundraising and or selling a company, M&A type stuff, but it could easily apply for sales, partnerships, and hiring. So, sorry, and just one thing, I joined Google 3 years ago after the role at Citibank as the startup ecosystem manager for Google, and this is my 3rd year presenting this at SpaceCom. So let me see if I can get this to it. Okay, I define pitching as connecting with your audience. If you're not connecting with your audience, your pitch is, dead on arrival. And to define it further, I mean entertain with evidence. And I'll break this down. Entertain, I mean not only connecting with the audience, but keeping their attention, entertaining them. And entertaining can be anything. It can be informational, it can be fun, it can be emotional, it doesn't matter, but you have to keep their attention. So first of all, if you don't connect with them, there is no pitch. If you're not able to keep their attention through the course of the pitch, you're not gonna even have a shot at a result. If you don't back it up with evidence, like you might be a great person, they love hanging out with you, but they have some sort of rubric that they're trying to solve for. And if you don't provide that evidence, your pitch literally cannot even have a shot. And like I mentioned, I pitched 1,000 times 28 out of them actually connected and landed the way I wanted to. So your odds, especially when it comes to fundraising, which I think has come up many times, is really hard. So you have to talk to a lot of people, and literally for the pitches that work, you have to connect with your audience, keep their attention the entire time, and provide them the evidence that they need to make their decision to move to whatever the next step is. So this slide deck has evolved over the last couple of years. Last year, particularly because it was at Spacecom, I put this picture of Elon Musk and Mars because it seemed appropriate for the audience. Before that, I had a picture of Steve Jobs holding the iPod, which seemed to work really well for the kind of the mass audience. However, if I were to create this deck from scratch today, I think I'd still use this picture. Whether it's a space audience or not, obviously Elon Musk has done amazing things, wealthiest person in the world, you know, a lot of attention, and people will know who he is. But it really is about his ability to pitch something that is extremely complex. And for the nerds and like those of us that fantasize about it, it's awesome. But literally, what goes into doing what he's trying to achieve is impossible by many definitions. So I know Jonathan just mentioned Simon Sinek. I'm a fan as well, and he referenced this talk called The Golden Circle. And I'm going to double click a little bit on what Jonathan talked about, not just simply about knowing your why, but something he saw, and also I've seen a lot with these phenomenal pitch people. And what Simon Sinek calls the golden circle, why in the middle, how, and then what, he uses to demonstrate that the normal person, average person, myself included, our instinct is to convey an idea by first saying what it is, then talking about how we're going to do it because we're so excited about that, and rarely, if ever, do we even mention why we're doing it in the first place. What Simon noticed, and now if you pay attention, you'll always notice, with people like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the Wright brothers, I know that's all men, you know, Oprah, people that you can think of that are, you know, have really created movements, they do the opposite. They start with why, then they explain a little bit about how, because you might buy into the why, but are they capable of doing it? And then maybe they mention the what, so that, you know, it can be easily categorized. So I'll use SpaceX as an example. And a very accurate way of describing it is SpaceX is a rocket company. How are they doing it? They're building reusable rockets that will help us eventually, you know, get to Mars and beyond. Why are they doing it? Increases shareholder value, they make a lot of money, they've reduced the cost, it's the right thing to do, okay? All perfectly fine answers, and probably everyone on this call can easily connect with it. I advise you to pay attention to how Elon Musk describes it. He would say something like, it is imperative to our existence as a civilization, as a species, that we become multiplanetary. How are we going to do that? We're going to do it by reducing the cost of space travel, by reusing rockets, and eventually setting up our first civilization bases in Mars, so we have that redundant backup of our society, of our civilization. Oh, and we're building a company that sells rocket or cargo space satellite companies. You know, again, the key is that it almost doesn't matter. It's that civilization level mission that captures everyone and buys them in. So this slide has also evolved over the last several years, and I realize, you know, speaking at Spacecom, there are government elements. There's nothing political that I mean about this slide. 4 years ago, when I first created this deck, I had a picture of Barack Obama. 2 years ago, I had a picture of Donald Trump, and this year I have both of them for a very particular reason. Wherever your political alignment is, I think we can all agree that both people did nearly the impossible. You know, there were major outsiders. Obama, you know, being a young, fairly unsuccessful politician, got his shot to speak in front of the world, is a phenomenal orator, and created a movement, and eventually won the presidency on a concept of hope. This is not, politics as normal, but he literally created a movement and got people to act, whether it's with their vote or support or wallet. Donald Trump did the same thing, very different. An outsider, a lot of people made fun of him. He made fun of a lot of people. But in the beginning, it was like a joke, and he created this movement, and we saw it up until a month ago, and probably still some, where people are moved to act in a certain way that maybe they wouldn't normally act or behave. And this is not just these two people. You see it with politicians all over. And I purposely gave this example because the point of this talk is not necessarily about science. It's or startups. It's pitching to stand out and connecting with your audience. So I forgot the person's name. I think it was Bernard, maybe, who asked about storytelling. And I know this has come up a few times. The next few slides are tips that I'd like to give that will help you be your authentic self. There's no way I can actually guide you to do that. You are yourself. Whenever you're not being yourself, something is off. You're pretending. It's much easier to just be yourself. I know that's easier said than done. But the purpose here of this tip, tell a story, is not so much of the structure of the story. In fact, I would actually even rename this. I would call this tell your story. But I don't know your story. Nobody does. Only you do. And only you can properly tell it in an authentic way. And stories will, have a beginning, a middle, and end, protagonist, antagonist, conflict, romance, excitement, whatever. I'm not talking about that structure. And I know the question before was, do you start with a story? Do you integrate a story into your pitch? I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, and I think you should do what works best for you and your audience. The key takeaway I'd like you to take, again, is not the structure of the story, but a story as a data structure. And I believe there's a lot of engineers on this call, and I think you'll appreciate it. The story is one of the oldest data structures we have as a society, as a species, as a civilization. In fact, for millennia, that's how information was passed down generation to generation. But one thing I want to kind of give you on a personal feeling about a story, and this is something you can test out, you'll probably recognize it right away. Someone can give you a list of dates, facts, situations, literally a list, talk you through it, or you can read it. 5 minutes later, you will not be able to recite any of it. Maybe, some words here, there are some things, but you're not going to memorize it, even if you're trying. However, if someone tells you a story, particularly a story that you connect with, I could ask you 5 years from now, and you'll be able to recite the story. Perhaps even verbatim with certain facts that just seem weird. Where did that store? How did I pull that memory? And for some reason, as humans, stories are a phenomenal way to transfer that information. They're also a phenomenal way to connect with your audience. They're also a phenomenal way to entertain your audience. Just think, children to adults, stories do that for us. And they're a phenomenal way to fit in that evidence that you need to deliver as part of your pitch. So the next thing, many of folks over the last couple of days have said this: keep it simple. And this, there's that acronym, keep it simple, stupid. I'll leave the stupid out because there are probably rocket scientists on this call. I cannot emphasize this more, especially to this audience, especially to engineers. People like Michael Mealing on the call will be listening to your pitch. Okay, he's a super smart guy. I've had a chance to work with him. He will understand everything you're saying. I still say dumb it down as if you're talking to, someone who is not in this industry. It's a good exercise for you to be able to do that. You're going to make his life a lot easier so he can focus on the main concepts. And in fact, that's actually why I love my current job about the pandemic. Literally, I can talk to my elderly parents about it, and they'll grasp everything I'm talking about, as well as, the CIO of NASA, which is a real call that we had, a keynote we gave to the FBI on this topic. So you have all these complex issues, and what you're doing is very complicated. People and investors will also pick up on your ability to simplify it. Taking that complex concept, being able to distill it down, it's almost like in the previous talk where it's like that crazy slide and you love that slide, but you're not empathetic to your customers. And keeping it simple from a story standpoint and a pitch standpoint is a huge benefit for you, but will also allow you and your investors to get to the goal that you're trying to reach. The next slide is demonstrate passion. This slide has also evolved over the years. Previously, I had James Brown dancing on a stage with his shirt off or shirt open. Really cool picture, a lot of energy in that picture. And as founders, you are both entertainers, performance entertainers, and you are both performance athletes. The reason I changed it to the sports example as opposed to the music example, in both those pictures, people are demonstrating their passion in a true, authentic way. People, especially technical founders, sometimes fall into the trap of seeing the entertainer and saying stuff like, I'm not good at that. I'm not charismatic. Teach me how I can show more energy. And the slide is not about energy, and I'll talk about that in a second. It's about your passion. And one of the previous speakers said, I loved it. I'm probably gonna borrow it, which is, you command the room. The energy of your audience can only be as high as your energy, and your energy better be the most. You better have the most energy, because this is your startup, right? If an investor can't get that excited or sees you're not excited about it, they're not going to be excited about it. And I'll give you a little personal anecdote about this, about demonstrating passion. Out of those 1,000 pitches and many mentoring sessions and all that, stuff I did as a founder. So some of the feedback elicited, a lot of it not. I've been told that I'm too serious. I'm not funny. I don't smile enough. I don't blink enough. I come off as low energy. And some of those things are true. My face naturally is not very smiley, unless we're in Houston having a few drinks. I don't blink. I don't know why. But I'm not serious, right? And I'm not low energy, especially when it comes to talking about things I'm passionate about. So and yet, 28 of those 1,000 pitches worked. Have raised millions of dollars, sold for millions of dollars, created millions of dollars of value, tens of millions of dollars of value. But when you are authentically connected with your passion, right? And hopefully you're aligned with the audience, the evidence is working for them. You create this infectious energy. And I say infectious because other people feel it, they feed off it, and you cannot fake that. And it doesn't matter how little you smile, how low energy people think you are, how awkward you are, how bad your jokes are, which when you become dads and moms, they'll become much worse. None of that matters, right? When you're authentically yourself and aligned with this passion, everyone else will pick up on it. And I'd like to tell a little anecdote about this. This actually isn't startup related, it's space related. 2 years ago, summer of 2019, with some of the folks on this call, I had, and some of the folks behind SpaceCom, I had the opportunity, the honor, and the privilege to host the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing, the official party at Google in New York, the New York City party. And there were dignitaries in the audience. There were 4 astronauts. There was a lot of our friends in the room at this private event. And outside of putting down the corporate card for the venue and the catering, there's really not much from a space standpoint that I could offer. Whereas like there was literally astronauts speaking, or that the head of the UN was speaking about space policy, the first private astronaut. But I made myself the MC of the entire event. And a Techstars managing director sent me a text while I was on stage. I only saw it later. And the text said, I hope you're having as much fun as it looks like you're having. And honestly, as a founder and, out of all those pitches, there were many times I felt that way, but to have someone actually recognize that, going in with that mindset of I'm low energy, I'm not funny, no one's going to laugh at me, whatever self-doubt, or sorry, everyone's going to laugh at me, not with me, doesn't matter when you're that connected with who you are and what you care about. So if there's any slide or any tip that you remember from this, this is the one that I think is the most important. I call it emotion first, then logic. We're all logical people. It's very natural that we would try to optimize for what our investors want to hear, right? So Neil said stuff like, these are the 4 questions I ask. Michael gave us some concept on, how they think about ROI. Very important for you to know all that, knowing your audience. But this is a very human-based, human nature type of connection. And the advice was given to me by a pretty prolific investor. He was the first investor in Spotify and has several other wins. Coincidentally, he's a friend now, but we happen to be working out of the same co-working space. And he offered to advise me while I was raising funds for my second startup, which was still hard, but not as hard as the first one. And this is the advice he gave me. He said, it's human nature. We'll put venture capitalists in that human bucket for now, but I'll talk about them separately. But it's human nature when someone presents any sort of logical proof to you. It's human nature to poke holes in that logic. Now, imagine if you're a venture capitalist, your job is literally risk management. You're trying to figure out, okay, what's the risk here? What's the return? So literally when someone is presenting you that logic, your job is to poke holes in it, see why it won't work, or see what the risk reward ratio is for something that could work but might not. However, this is getting back to human nature. When you connect with someone emotionally first, and that could be through a story, it could be through some sort of personal connection. A lot of founders ask me, how do I do that? Again, I cannot teach you. It's be human, be yourself. Human connection is very important. We all know it now more than ever. But when you connect with someone emotionally first, something magical happens. Human nature. The mind shifts. It's almost impossible for the mind not to shift, to go from poking holes to filling gaps. Jonathan mentioned in his call, like I think you called it bringing them to the side of your table. I love that as well. It's the same exact concept. You'll notice it. First of all, you'll feel it. Second, their mode of speaking changes. It's less about that won't work because, or why should I believe this will work, to how do we make this work? So it's literally, and I've noticed this also in hiring and partnership and sales, but in fundraising, it's that moment where I know I got to get out soon, right? I haven't necessarily achieved my goal yet, but like any more talking, like I've converted them. And I can literally, it's much easier to say this in hindsight, but if I go back and put myself in that place of those 28 successful pitches, they all had that same trend. Now, luckily, I'm not a startup founder. I'm not fundraising right now, so I'll have to test it if and when I go back. But it's definitely that moment that I can tell. And I'm not a good investor. I've been on a judge on many pitch panels and stuff, but it's also something I notice when people win pitch competitions. When people are talking to investors and you see that investor getting to the next step, hey, come by the office, or let's have a follow-up call. You see that shift in their logic. And that doesn't necessarily mean you guys went to the same college, or it doesn't mean they love your story or whatever, but you were able to connect with them emotionally first. So that is it. Stefan, I hope I didn't kill too much of the time.
No, there was nothing killed. It was awesome, Tej, as always. I do remember that. I looked it up. It was October of 2017. We sat underneath that overpass near the Grand Central. We have about 5 minutes of question time for you. So please feel free to ask Tej, jump on the video or just in chat. Tej, thank you so much for sharing that powerful presentation.
Hi, Tej. This is Brian Barnett with Soulstar Space. How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Hey, just wanted to say great job again. Same as last year. Different presentation, but both really good presentations.
Yeah, and congratulations to you too. I don't know if you know, but I was part of the crowdfunding of your company.
Yes, I do. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that support and the advertisement you just gave us.
Tej, if it's all right, I have a question. So part of what gets me excited as like an engineer founder is working on the stuff. And our company is kind of small right now, scrappy to say the least. So how can I play that narrative of like, oh, we're in basements and garages building things with scrap without coming off as like, who are these scrubs? These guys are herbs, I don't want to trust them with my money. They're not working in a clean room in a lab. So what's the best balance between, coming off as scrappy and or scrubby?
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll say. One is, my background as a founder and in the startup ecosystem is not so much from like lab and clean room. And I don't know if you've seen like tech founders. There's no other way to describe them besides scrubby. And scrappy is a badge of honor, right? So I think, first of all, don't sell yourself on the narrative that that's bad. Second, I can already tell, and I'm not a fan of virtual anything. I loved my job before the pandemic. I love life. I still love life, but like, being in person, it energizes me. This kind of stuff, like I'm going to be drained after. I love being with all of you, but it doesn't serve the same purpose for me. However, just simply the words when you said what excites me perk me up, right? Like that's your narrative. And there is, I can't remember who said it, but maybe it was Ben Horowitz. But there's like the two things that matter the most about founders are their resourcefulness, their scrappiness, their ability to build things with limited resources, and their storytelling ability, right? Can they sell that vision? Can they hire that first person? Can they get the first customer? Can they get the first investor? So I think, I don't have the answer of how you build that narrative, but I just think you have it already, right? And I think being excited about building stuff, liking being scrappy, like that type of instinct and feeling will carry through even like a company like Google, right? That those founders were that way 20 plus years ago, and that culture is still carried through, even though the company has tons of money and does a ton of stuff. They're good things. I think that is your narrative.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, Tej. Thanks so much for your presentation. And I mean, your background is quite extensive. I really like the numbers you put out, like 28 good connections out of 1,000, and all the stories you told. My question is on something you actually just touched on how do you sell that vision? I mean, think of a startup, maybe one founder, a couple of founders, but then you want to sell this vision, and mind you, this vision is occurring literally out of this world in space, right? Like, will the investors be hearing, these people are biting too much, more than they can chew, or is it possible to really connect with them, like you mentioned, emotion? Like, can you touch more on that, please? Thanks.
Yeah. So I think there's three things in your question that stuck out to me. One is, you said it was 28 good connections out of 1,000. That's not accurate. It's 28 successful pitches. Out of 1,000 pitches, those pitches each took, like hundreds of connections. So, and this is spread over 10 years, multiple fundraising rounds and all that stuff. There's a second half to this deck about the process of fundraising, which is really hard and disciplined. So just want to make it clear to all investors, all founders, you're going to be meeting thousands of people, but you're going to be compiling lists and trying to get warm and cold connections. I mean, it's 10x isn't even the right number. Like you really have to cast a wide net to land those few. Second thing you said that stuck out to me was about the human connection. And like I said, I don't think that's anything about fundraising. I think that's about knowing yourself, self-awareness, and connecting with other people on whatever level it takes. I know it's hard when there's an immediate power dynamic. You're raising money from folks. You've gone through a ton of rejection at this point, but still you have to be yourself and you have to make that connection, whatever it is. And then the last piece you said is like, you're literally selling a vision that is out of this world. If you were ever looking to hire me, you would have to have that vision, right? And I feel like, at least in the companies that I started, the people that I hired were the same. They're looking to, you have that leadership. You're the founder, you're the CEO, and I'll tell you what I think your job is, if assuming you're the CEO, for the rest of your life as CEO. And vision is the most important thing. Now, that vision is out of the world. okay, right? If you're looking for a rubric on how to sell it, I love the golden circle. Force yourself, write it down, say, why are we doing this? How are we doing it, what we're doing, just so you have a way. Maybe that delivery works for you, maybe it doesn't. I also think, Stefan's point about creating the different length pitches will force you to articulate it. I think Sunil said yesterday, like the beginning of every slide, he likes you like a 6-word what it is. Your job is not to impress, it's to communicate. So like, again, like don't get caught up. But getting back to the point of the vision, I believe, and I've learned this from coaches of mine, startup coaches, the job of the CEO is threefold. One is to set and hold the vision. So whatever you believe the vision is, whatever that why is, you're going to have to hold that more so than anybody else in your organization. Your co-founders, your employees, your investors, your customers, and you're going to be the one that has to always hold that North Star in mind to everyone. Second, it's to recruit the right people to execute on that vision. And third is to provide them with the resources they need, whether, fundraising team, whatever. And I think the beginning of all that is the vision. So if it's out of this world, great, right? I think, to attract the right people, to attract people from Google, engineers from Google, or Facebook or Microsoft or LinkedIn, what people are getting paid today compared to literally the question about scrappiness, you're not going to have money to entice them on basic level stuff. You're going to have to entice them through vision.
Hey, Tej.
Yeah.
My product is the ability to build large structures in space. It's going to be a few years before it can be commercialized. What's my pitch to the investors?
Yeah, so I think this is where probably my knowledge, there's a gap here. There's several folks, mentors on that I think that can help you with it. And the gap there for me is all of my startups were tech startups, apps, different industries, but they all kind of fit into the time horizon. I think Michael spoke about this yesterday also, well into the time horizon, and they were binary, right? They were either going to sell or they weren't, and that's literally exactly what happened. I think for you, understanding the industry, understanding the venture market, coming up with that vision, coming up with also the clear definition of what it is, and then coming up with the evidence, right? Because it sounds to me you're going to need capital for a while, and the investors are going to have that appetite. I remember, I don't know if it was this year or last year, Sunil gave kind of the thoughts behind a VC, what he knew before in his previous role in his new company. It's fascinating. It's like the math is very, very strange. It's something I actually still don't understand. I mean, I kind of happenstance into it with my 3 startups, and by the third, we were able to raise venture capital, with that consistent story that met with them. But I think for this industry, I'd say talk to the mentors that Spacecom has pulled together and ask that direct question to all of them.
Thank you.
I have a thought. I don't actually think Elon Musk is a good example for folks. If you look at how his pitches were received before he flew rockets, and you look at how his pitches were received after he flew rockets, it's a night and day difference. I think he has a very particular style of pitching. And if one of us were to try and go that vision heavy on a pitch to investors, I think they'd likely think we were an idiot. And Elon was able to get to where he is, I think, in large part because he started with, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I just don't know if trying to emulate where he is now and his pitching style is necessarily is the right place to look for advice for companies that are in the position that I think most of the companies here are in. And I think that the reason he's viewed as the way that he is has to do with a lot of history that it isn't something that can actually be emulated. And again, I think if you just took the words that came out of his mouth and you put them in somebody else's mouth, with without the context of what he's done, that it would come off very, very differently and probably pretty poorly to investors.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair statement. And again, there are a handful of people in history that have been able to pitch that way, and there's a lot of context behind it. And I think Mike, maybe you said it, like There have literally been Twitter accounts, this is more on the political side, that emulate, like literally copy what a certain politician will say, and it won't, like the words don't land without that context. I think the key takeaway from my talk, and if you get a chance, watch the YouTube video of Simon Sinek, is how these people actually deliver those pitches. Now that why, how, and what, the why doesn't always have to be I'm out of this world doing this. That why can be, a friend of mine is like, his father was diagnosed with cancer, and even with all the best medicine and healthcare, the doctors weren't communicating, and he created a social network to help residents and cancer doctors, I'm drawing a blank on the word, to have a social network where they can create that. And that why is extremely powerful, right? It's very personal. So don't necessarily conflate vision with, obviously we're all talking about space and rockets and going out there, but that vision and that connection you're making is very much about you and what matters to you. It's not what you think sounds good. It's what, if everything else was stripped away, you'd still believe. And honestly, I believe Elon Musk, I don't know him by any means, but I honestly do believe that core of the multiplanetary species is probably what he believes.
Hi, Tej. Thanks for that. That's great stuff. I'm Bernard with Fieldy. We're developing crop forecasts to stabilize commodity pricing across Africa. And we're actually using Google Cloud to monitor about 600,000 fields every month using ESA satellites. Quick question: is there a book that you think shaped you and what you're able to do, or a book that you think we should have read or we should read?
I hate that question. Like, for the New Yorkers in the room, it's going to be like when someone asks you what's the best restaurant in New York, your mind goes blank immediately. For books,
you might be reading Harry Potter now or something. I don't know, but you can make it up as you go along.
Yeah, no, I'd say like the one that immediately came to mind, and it's not something necessarily that I would answer in a group that was different from this. Like, again, with the executives that I work with, probably not, but with founders. I read The Hard Thing About Hard Things, Ben Horowitz's first book, and that really resonated with me. Like, really, like it was just it was very visceral and real. And I think for founders to read that, I think it's a good level setting. Like, I know at least I got into the startup game because of ambition, aspiration, being naive. Who knows what it was? Like, never realizing how hard it was. And I stayed in the game for a long time, but it's really hard. And you're choosing to do this. So understanding why you're doing this and the sacrifices you're making, I think that book was really good. A recent one along those lines, and I sort of mentioned this coach I worked with, Jerry Colonna. He wrote a book called Reboot. That's also really good. When I talk to founders, I tend to lean towards more of these kind of emotional awareness, self-awareness type books for founders, because it's a very unique experience you're going through.
Thanks so much again, Tej. Really appreciate it. And Tej, you'll be able to stick around for a couple minutes to answer questions on the chat. Great.
Yep.
Thanks again. So next we have Mayank, and I wanted to give an opportunity to an entrepreneur to share their journey through pitching and fundraising. So Mayank, just so you know, we'll give you about 5 minutes, and for those of you that can stay after, we can extend this workshop for a couple minutes, because I wanted to have a couple of closing remarks by the Spacecom folks, as well as talking about next week. So Mayank, the webinar is yours. I think you're on mute still.
So can you see my screen? And can you see me?
We can see you. We saw your screen for a sec, yeah.
Okay, I'll share it again. So yeah, hi everyone, and nice to meet you guys. I'm speaking from Germany actually right now. So yeah, I'm a founder at Celestial Space Technologies, and I'm here to quickly share my journey about the company and about the fundraising that we did in the past 3 years now, and just quickly to give you about our journey. So basically, we have a vision where we want to deploy a constellation around Moon to provide a communication infrastructure for the upcoming missions. Now, this is a vision which is not yet existing as a market. And this is also where the challenge came for us because you are pitching for a market which doesn't exist. And this is why we were instructed and we quickly realized to apply for short-term goals. And this is also one of the learnings that I will share with you. So it's a short-term goal where we want to develop only the communication systems and not the satellite itself. And we are already starting providing these to the Earth market, which is also making our business case now a viable one when we compare it to only pure lunar vision that was a little bit unviable for that time. So this is basically the journey that we took. So we started in 2018. Me and my co-founder, we met in a hackathon, and this is also where we started pitching our idea for the Moon. And we got some funding from European Social Fund. This is also the key advantage that we had in the initial phases, that we were successful in getting the fundings from the public sources, which helped us to progress our project into space habitat mission, to collaborate with Swiss Space Center and to European Space Agency. So we started working out with this one, and in 2019 we joined other accelerator programs, and we had an international awards in our pocket. Then we were working with this Swiss Space Centers on analog mission, which is where we got prototyping funding. So we were working on these small fundings until 2020. We went into ESA, where we established our company last year, and this is also where we have our first company. And then this year in January, so last month, we opened up a subsidiary in Luxembourg, where we have got now funding from Fit for Start. And now we have a vision actually, which is going to the Moon, but we have also realized how important it is to have the specifications of being a vertical integrator in the industry to cover the entire value chain. And this is also where we are now converting our vision to. And I quickly wanted to highlight how you might look to a software as a startup, which generally investors like. And this is also where it is okay to have this little stretched out curve on your financial terms, where you might take longer to get break even or to get profitable. And this is a general trend of a space company, and the dotted line that you see is what we took as Celestial. So we did not start from zero as other startups do and go into negative starting. We had this public grants. So I advise you to actually look into these public grants and start little above the line, and then start going down with the equity investments, and then raise yourself to basically getting into this equity based fundings and to reach to profitability or break evens. Because this positive which you have a little bit in front would actually help you realize your prototypes, or would help you realize your first products as in our case. And this would be a great motivator and great accelerator for you to actually realize your vision soon, and people to get confident with your team. This is basically how I wanted to quickly go through, but I don't have so much time, so I will just skim through this. This is an image or how a typical startup grows from idea to IPO stage, and how different funding sources can play a role in this. And this is what I wanted to highlight basically quickly, but I wouldn't go into details of these. I just wanted to highlight that this is where we had this lower graph, where we were continuously working with competitions, small grants, and accelerators for public grants. These were the three main sources for our fundings in the starting, and they're still right now. So we still have the entire company with us. So it's not invested yet. So we don't have equity-based funding with us at the moment. This is something which is private equity investments, and we are looking at VCs or CVCs for different from different sources, with also possible buyout options could be there. So it is your strategy how you want to formulate it. But as of now, I would say for a space company, and starting from classroom, as we started building company from classroom, the competitions, the grants, and the accelerators were very helpful, which has made us to come to this line. And this is basically the journey that we took. So we got our first grant, founders grant, in 2018 back then, where we landed ourselves into prototypes, and we landed ourselves into making the proof of concept technology. And based on this, we actually were able to formulate our business plan into more mature business plan, because we had proof of concept, we have validated our assumptions, and then we collaborated with ESA BIX, where we got another public grant without giving up equity, which has led us now into a product launch phase, and now we're looking into sales activity, which has made ourselves eligible to get into a subsidiary now with Fit for Start, and we are having a potential 150k Luxembourg money coming to us, and then we start our seed round. So we took this unique path, which I did not see many accelerators doing this. They were looking for their own investments, friends, family, and pools. They were going through that path, or they would generally get an investor right away in the starting, which was also smart move. But I think this, I would say, is even better if you are able to retain your company in the starting years until unless you start making revenues. Then you are also in a better position to negotiate with your investors, I believe. So that's how I see. And I also just wanted to give few suggestions. If you're working in a team, something what you do is you also should work on your founders, so you know their life goals as well. Do not just focus on the vision of the company, but also focus on the team you are working with or you're about to work with. What will happen 5 years down the line with the team? And then have vision, really far-sighted vision, and then the vision of short terms, and then the short-term vision should clearly define your goals and your steps to reach your final vision, basically. And is the workshop over?
Almost. No, we'll give you a parting comment. Sorry about that.
All right. Yeah, it was anyway last slide, and then there was comments. So I think you might be sharing the slides, I think, anyway. So
yes.
you can
Yes. Thank you, Mayank. And ideally, if we're all sitting in the same room, I would have loved to have a panel of entrepreneurs and founders talking. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. So.
Yep, no problem.
Thanks. So congratulations, you've made it through workshop week. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've managed to make some new friends, make some contacts, gain some experience, gain some knowledge, and share. I wanted to give James an opportunity, if you're still on, to jump on to say a couple of closing words before I go through the housekeeping for next week.
Okay. Can you hear me, Stefan?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, well, as Stefan said, I want to congratulate everyone for their participation this week. I think the thing that's most exciting is the way that hopefully we've been able to make the whole experience for you as collaborative and as communicative as humanly possible in this remote environment that we're having to live in. My biggest takeaway is the amazing array of perspectives that everyone on this during this workshop is now going to have the benefit of. I particularly learned a lot from all the speakers and just thought they were terrific. And I think as well, you got a very good smattering of the types of mentorship that you will be able to experience next week as we go forward with this. So thank you all very much, and we're very proud of what's been accomplished here, and I'll turn it back to Stefan. Thank you, Stefan, and thank you all.
Great, thank you, James. Appreciate the opportunity to chair this year's SES and to really watch through the challenges and work through the challenges. Like you said, it has been challenging. We're always driven off of excitement and energy, as you heard today in terms of pitching, energy from the room. And thank you all for sharing and adapting to asking questions. So again, what we're doing in the next slide, a couple of slides, is to review the judging criteria. So these are the criteria that the finals judges are going to be using to judge the finalists on stage. But keep these in mind as you're being selected to be one of the 5 finalists. So in terms of the next steps, you finished this week, yay, for workshop week. The preliminary video is due by the 7th. It's just, again, to get you prepared for Mentor Week. So during Mentor Week, you'll have the opportunity to use that content to be mentored and hopefully revised if you needed to. If not, if you knocked it out of the park, that's great. The final 1 minute video will be due next Friday at the 12th, and the 5 finalists will be announced on Monday the 15th. And we're going to have this live stream on the 18th. And again, urge you all to attend. The next slide talks about the schedule, which you should all, well, during Mentor Week, you'll get this 15 minutes of fame of working with the mentors. And on the next slide is the schedule. Hopefully you all have this. Please be prompt. Please feel free to, it's not in any particular order. We're going to try to go by this order for each day, but feel free, please participate the entire time. Allocate that time because you'll learn a lot from listening to other people get mentored as well. And for those of you that are interested, you're welcome to attend any and all these sessions, except we want to keep at least the floor available to the folks that are dedicated to that time. Again, I'm open for any questions you might have. We're over the time, so in respect of your time, feel free to drop off. And again, the welcoming there is for you to join the finals, and we'll get the word out. We'll be communicating to you through email and also through the Startup Included platform. So thanks again, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free.
Just one question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
About the presentation from all the folks this week and last week, it would be good if we could have PDFs or PowerPoint presentations so that we can click on that links that they had in presentation. So it would be great if you would make some web address that we could just with one click download all the presentation from all the presenters. That would be very good for our readiness for the next week.
Okay, Victor.